Hi there. Thanks for joining me today. So we're going to talk all about continuous glucose monitors today. Hmm. Woo. Okay. I was hearing myself in an echo. We're going to talk about continuous glucose monitors today, CGMs, because they've become really popular. As some of you know, if you're joining this and watching the replay, continuous glucose monitors have been around for a long time, but of course they have traditionally been used for people who have diabetes. That's who they were insured for. That's who they were prescribed for. But you might have noticed that more and more people are using them. People who aren't using insulin, people who have prediabetes, and all the way to people who want to optimize their health. Biohackers have been using them, and people who want to prevent diabetes. So there's actually a lot of really good reasons to use these for a short period of time. So because I specialize in my business, I specialize in metabolic health, helping people prevent and reverse diabetes. In my functional nutrition practice, I get a lot of questions about using continuous glucose monitors. And that's because I use them as a provider as just another one of the tools that I use with my nutrition clients. If I see somebody who I think has metabolic issues, we'll just all ask their doctor, could you prescribe one of these so we could use this for a month or two? And they do, and we use it, so they can understand how to use their diet skillfully to balance their blood sugar. No more guessing. We're testing and seeing exactly how food affects them. And I also run group programs. But aside from me and some other dietitians who I trained to do this, we know there's a lot of tech companies, and there's a lot more tech companies popping up who are supporting CGM use. And so the way I do it is I'm a human and I look at people's data with them, help teach them how to read it, interpret it, act on it, and create meal plans and make some reasonable strategies. The tech companies tend to use an AI and some app features where you can sort of DIY it a little bit using their AI, and then sometimes combine that with also working with a nutrition professional. So the good news is there's a lot of different ways you can access this technology, a lot of different ways you can use it depending on what kind of support you need, what your budget is. But the downside always of having so many choices is it's really confusing as to who does what and what you need to do and how much it costs. So that's why, I have a lot of YouTube videos. If you're not following me on YouTube and you're interested in this, do subscribe to my YouTube channel or just get on there because I have a lot of good information for people wanting to use it for their own health and providers, doctors, dietitians, coaches, so that they can learn how to use this to support their clients. Because I think in about 5 years, this is going to start being a much more normal thing for people to use the same way I'm using it. I'm using it to assess people. How is your metabolism? Do you have some insulin resistance? Are you reacting to food in a negative way? I use it for education. So instead of just me saying, you should eat this and you shouldn't eat this, which, I mean, I know something, but I don't know what's going on in an individual's body. Each person can really have some more agency, put it on their arm, see how their food's affecting them, and work with me to modify their diet in a way that is both better for their metabolism, but also is to their liking. It includes their food preferences. So I think it's going to be used more as that assessment, educational piece. And of course, some people use it for accountability. Some of my clients say, I just eat better when I'm using it. It's a little coach on my arm. So I don't care your reasons for using it. There's a lot of good reasons for using it, especially using it for the short term, for maybe 1 to 3 months. So I've got some questions here, and I'm just going to jump in and start answering them in the order that I've received them. Some are more in depth than others, so I'm going to keep an eye on the chat and respond to those questions too. But the first person who's asking me is Marta. She's asking, how can we get a prescription for it? Does this device work with Bluetooth? What effect does that have on the body? And can I be on a cleanse while using this device? So this is the first question, and a lot more of the questions later on I see are a little bit more basic, but I'm going to get to this first. So how do we get a prescription? This is the $1,000,000 question that most people ask because they think, like I did when I first encountered this, oh, I won't be able to get it because you have to get a prescription. Well, think about continuous glucose monitors as they are FDA approved for people with diabetes using insulin. If you don't have diabetes, they're not FDA approved, but that doesn't stop doctors from prescribing it. In fact, prescribing it for something other than what there's FDA approval for, this is called an off-label prescription. And I think most prescriptions written in the United States are off-label prescriptions. In fact, metformin, one of the most popular drugs prescribed for people with diabetes and pre-diabetes, is an off-label prescription for pre-diabetes. But we know that it's been shown to be effective. So doctors, the FDA doesn't regulate doctors and prescribers. They regulate the manufacturers. So your doctor can prescribe it for you if they like. If you just say, hey, I have a history of diabetes in my family, I'm concerned, or wow, my numbers are going up. I'd like to take a little bit more control over my health and see how my food's affecting me. Would you prescribe one of these CGMs for me for 1 to 3 months so I can get a handle on that? Please. That's all you have to do, and your doctor should prescribe it. But here's the thing. Making an off-label prescription for a provider, there's a couple things they're looking for that they're obligated to be looking out for you. One is the price. They want to make sure that you have informed information about what it's going to cost. And I've noticed that a lot of doctors think that these continuous glucose monitors are more expensive than they actually are. And I think it's because there's 2 continuous glucose monitors that you couldn't access as a consumer. And one is the Dexcom, the G6 or the newer G7, Dexcom. And the other one is the Freestyle Libre. Now you can get the Libre 2 and the Libre 3. The Dexcom seems to be doing a little more education with providers, and the Dexcom is much, much more expensive. And so providers tend to think that the Libre is also that expensive. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but the Libre is less expensive, and you can say, I'm willing to pay cash. Could you prescribe this Libre? I know how much it costs, and I'll get into costs later. So that's it. Let them know you know what the costs are. You want the Libre. If insurance isn't going to cover it, and we'll go into that. I see there's questions about insurance. And so that's how you get it. When I work with my clients, whether they're in my group programs or we're working one-on-one, I give them a letter that they can download for their doctor that says, I am working with, hi, my name is Karen. Your patient is working with me for their blood sugar. Would you please write this prescription for this prescription code? And I'm going to be supporting them. Because also they want someone supporting them because this data can be really helpful, but also it can just be confusing. I've even seen dietitians get the data and really not know what to do with it until they have some more experience with looking at it. Not that they don't understand metabolism or blood sugar, but it's a new tech. It's something that maybe we haven't been trained in. So it can be helpful to get some input from a professional on what does this mean? What should I do about it? What's good enough? What am I looking for in this data? It's not intuitive. So they want to know you're getting support. They want to know that you know what the price is and that you're willing to pay cash because it's not something that your doctor's used to. And in terms of, does it work with Bluetooth? Yes. The overwhelming majority of people, there's a free app that you can use with both of these. And you just either scan or it automatically, the app picks up the sensor and all of your glucose data goes to the app on your smartphone, right? But you need to have, what's it called? Near field communication, NFC, in order for that to work. Otherwise, you use a reader. You buy a separate reader and you can use that and it stays offline. The effect it has on the body, I really can't say that for sure. I don't think it has a huge effect. And for my patients, I don't tend to have them on a continuous glucose monitor for more than a month, maybe 3. So I find that the benefit far outweighs any small negative impact it could have. And can you be on a cleanse while using this device? Absolutely, yes. I think it would be great because a lot of times I think about cleanses as something where you want to get your insulin levels down and have healthy blood sugar. So why not have some feedback? The next question is, what if my doctor won't write me a prescription? This is always someone's concern. It's a common concern. It's a common concern for people using it for themselves and for, say, dietitians who are working with patients and they want to get them on a CGM. Um, mo- Overwhelmingly, most doctors that I ask will prescribe this. It takes sometimes a little convincing, like with the letter, and I always remind my patients to advocate for that. But if that is just a no-go, if that is not possible, there are ways to do this. There are online pharmacies that you can go to that have a prescriber on staff, and you will get the prescription and they'll sell it to you. And of course, the price is higher. It might be like, let's say if your pharmacy charged you $70 for a continuous glucose monitor, $50, $70, you might end up paying $90 per sensor that way, right? And you can also, so that price could be a wash if, let's say you haven't seen a doctor, you need to get a new doctor, make an appointment, you have a copay, it takes you time, it takes you money. Maybe you'd just be better off buying it from an online pharmacy or from one of these tech companies like Very, Level, Signos, because they also sell you the continuous glucose monitor. A little bit more expensive, but otherwise there are ways to get it. Brent's online and says, my wife and I both use Ageless RX for a prescription. Yes, that Ageless RX is one. There's also one, I posted it. I have a group called CGM for Everyone on Facebook. And I posted a little while ago about another source of diabetes supplies, is another one, which is great. But it says, we've been wearing 10 days. And my question is, my sensor is consistently 25 to 35 points off from capillary glucose, even if I wait 5 to 10 minutes. Do you think this is a bad sensor? My wife's is within 5 points. Should I contact Abbott? So Brent, this is a trend I've been seeing. I'm guessing you are using a Libre 2. So there's two answers to this. The first answer is a glucometer that does finger prick glucose. First of all, they actually can be off as well, depending on the age of the strips. But it has benefits and drawbacks, and a CGM has benefits and drawbacks. Sometimes the CGM can be off by a certain amount, but what we find is rather than focusing on the exact number within reason, focus on the trends and noticing what foods, what activities are beneficial and unbeneficial, and then do those beneficial things more often and the less beneficial things less often. And that's where you get the real improvement. But in terms of assessment, I see your point. And if it's that much off, then I always recommend people contact Abbott. Just go to their customer service, their phone number, or they have a Facebook page that they are pretty active on, and send them a message and then ask them for a voucher or a free sensor to replace. But I've noticed this year, the Libre 2 has been way off for my groups. When I'm running a group and say there's 15, some people in there, it seems like there's at least a couple of sensors that are really problematic. So I'm generally, hi Patty. Yes, so I'm generally recommending people use the Libre 3. The Libre 3 is a little different. You don't have to scan it for one. I'm finding it's more accurate than Libre 2 lately. But the Libre 3 is not covered by Medicare, Medicaid right now because it doesn't work with the reader. So the answer is yes, Brent. I always contact Abbott if I'm having trouble with one of their products. And if it's defective, I ask them to replace it. However, if it's off by a consistent amount that's reasonable to you, you can use your glucometer and test it maybe 2 or 3 times and say, let's say it's off by 10 points consistently. Maybe your CGM is higher 10 points consistently. That's an opportunity to just internally calibrate it and know, oh, okay, whatever I'm reading on this sensor, I just always assume that I'm 10 points lower than what it says. So that's just a calibration that you can do in your head. It's not something you can adjust on your CGM. Great question. Which CGM should I get is another one that I hear a lot. And this is a great question. There's more than 2 types of continuous glucose monitors on the market, but for the people I'm working with, you're not going to go with the one that's implanted for like a long period of time. That's generally people with diabetes using on insulin. You're going to be looking at 2, the Dexcom, the G6 or G7, or the Libre, Freestyle Libre by Abbott, which is the Libre 2 or Libre 3. And then which one you choose, there's a lot of different variables. One depends on if your insurance is covering it, and we'll talk about that. If your insurance is not going to cover it, I just recommend using a Libre because they are far, far less expensive. And I recommend the Libre 3 for the reasons I just stated. As for the Dexcom, I find the insurance companies are covering Dexcom more than Libre if they're covering them lately. And I think Dexcom has just done more legwork on that. And if that's the case, you can use that. The thing I don't like about the Dexcom is you can't log your food in there. And when I'm working with clients, I'm teaching them how to manage this and how to read it like I do so that they don't need me forever. So I'm training them. And so it's one nice thing about the app, the free app that Abbott puts out for the Libre is every time you scan it or whenever you want, you can just go in and say, turkey sandwich, chips, Coke, beer and pizza, slept like crap. So you can put those in. And then when we view your data, your 24 hours of data, all those notes will be in there at time points so we can connect the dots. And that's an educational tool that's just priceless. You can't do that with Dexcom. So you just have to write it down in some other way. So it's a little clunkier, but the Dexcom's a great product. The G7 is out and available and fantastic. Far more expensive without insurance. So any of those are good. I would prefer the G7 from the Dexcom and definitely the Libre 3 from Abbott. The next one is, will my insurance cover this? And will my insurance cover the membership? I think this is in reference to some of the tech companies for memberships, but it might also be I don't do memberships necessarily, but I do programs. So let me break that down into what insurance will cover and what it won't. First, I cannot speak for insurance because if you're in the US, we don't have a healthcare system. We have a market economy where insurance companies come in and do whatever they want and cover however they want. There's no real system. So if your insurance covers it, it's really based on 3 things. One is your diagnosis. Do you have diabetes? The traditional one is if you have diabetes and you're using insulin and or testing 3 times a day, I think, then the answer is usually yes. But again, it depends. It also depends, but some people get insurance coverage if they don't even have pre-diabetes, right? I've seen this not a lot, but a few times, and people get it for pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes without insulin. So it's all over the place. But your diagnosis, it'll depend how your doctor codes your prescription, what diagnosis codes they put on there. So, if they put dysglycemia, there's a lot of diagnosis codes, metabolic syndrome, prediabetes, obesity, dysglycemia, hypoglycemia. It just depends what they put. And then it depends on your insurance policy. So there's so many moving parts to this that I never guarantee if insurance will cover it. You just have to call your insurance company and ask. Patty, is a Libre 3 easy to get now for most people without Medicare? Yes. Well, and even people with Medicare, but you have to pay cash. I find the Libre 3 is widely available, I'll come to this for another one. I always call the local pharmacies and ask. In my local area, because I work online with people all over the place, but still the majority of my clients are local to me. And so I keep tabs on my local Kroger's, Fred Meyer's, Walmart, Costco, pharmacies, Walgreens, to see what they're charging and what they have in stock. If I'm in one of them and the pharmacy doesn't have a line, I'll go in and say, hey, are you stocking the Libre 3? Do you have the G7? What's the cash price? And get them to tell me. And I always tell my clients, before you go in and decide where to take your prescription, call the pharmacy that you usually use and see what they're charging. And if they have it. But most of them, if they don't have it in stock, they'll order it. Yeah. But that's, Patty, I know you're a provider. So for you, I would just call some of your local pharmacies and see what the deal is with them and badger them. Because if you ask the cash price and they don't tell you, just say, yeah, you can tell me. Just tell me how much it costs. And I'm a little glib about this because people asking for continuous glucose monitors when they don't have insurance coverage and they're not using insulin, it still seems kind of new. It still seems kind of new. It's way better than it was 2 years ago. When I started asking people, when I started doing this, I had to twist arms all over the place. But now it's just getting much more mainstream and people are more savvy. How much does this cost? How much will this cost me is the next question I have. And the cost, I think you'll get some of this already. The cost depends on a few things. But let's say for now, the situation is your insurance isn't covering it. And tangent, I find that some people who really need to be using a CGM because I know they have blood sugar issues, we will use it for a month without insurance coverage. And then I'll write their provider or give them, a little printout of some of the data that we've seen and improvements. Their doctor sees that, sees how valuable this tool is and how important this data is. That's my dog, Ozzy. And then they go, oh, wow, this is important. They'll see that blood sugar is an issue and how important this is. And lo and behold, the way they code is different. And now the insurance covers it. So sometimes we can start without insurance, give some feedback to the provider, the prescriber, get them on board, and then away we go. So it depends. I have more experience with the cash price of the Freestyle Libre CGM. I have never recommended a Dexcom unless someone has insurance coverage for it. And it used to be, really 6 months ago, you used to be able to get a Libre 14-day or Libre 2 for $40 to $75 for a 14-day period. And they have gone up, and I see them more routinely at more like $50 to $75 a piece. And now, of course, because it's such a weird system, sometimes you can get discounts like GoodRx sometimes will give you a discount. And I have been quoted one price when I've called on the phone. And then once I go through and check out, it's a lower price I will go through Kroger or Fred Meyer's pharmacy and I have a much lower price. I'm like, I don't know what happened. They just have this magic system that changes the price when you check out. So, it's a mystery, but I typically find that using a Libre is going to be, about $150 for a month. That seems to be what it is, but every pharmacy is different. Every pharmacy prices it different. So you have to call and ask. So Alicia wrote and said, my pharmacy stopped stocking the 14-day and gave me a Libre 2 instead. She was replying to an older YouTube video that I had. But now the alarms are waking me up in the middle of the night. And I called Abbott, advised me to cut off the low and high glucose alarm, but the one waking me up is the urgent low. Yes, the alarms. So whenever I work with people and I get them set up, the first thing we do is turn off the alarms because the alarms are critical life-saving features for people on insulin who are prone to dangerous hypoglycemia. If that's you, I'm not talking to you here. You keep them, you know how to adjust them. But if you're someone for whom hypoglycemia is not an issue, you want to switch all those alarms off. And I've got a video out there on turning off the alarms, but basically there's 4 alarms and there's a place on the app. If you're watching the hamburger menu, hit it, go to alarms, 4 alarms. 3 of them you can turn off: high glucose, low glucose, and signal loss alarm. Turn them all off. The urgent low, like Alicia says, you can't turn off. But what you can do is at night, turn off your Bluetooth. Just turn your Bluetooth off on your phone, and then it won't wake you up. It's really important because you do not need to be woken up by this. And no, Medicaid, Medicare covers the Libre 2. It does not cover Libre 3. And I believe that's because the Libre 3 doesn't sync up with a reader. You have to use a smartphone with it. So I don't know when they're going to change that. But right now, Medicaid doesn't cover the Libre 3. Let's see, the next person is from Gabriel. What if I'm a professional or a very informed consumer? It's just glucose values in the end, which is straightforward. And if I really need it, I can just get a dietitian to help me create a meal plan. Either way, you can learn patterns over time, provided you can examine your own glucose levels over time. That's absolutely true. So there are ways you can do that. So if you are a professional or very informed consumer, you can do what I do, which is get a prescription, ask your doctor, or go to one of these online pharmacies, get your CGM, hook it up, and you can use, so I usually offer like a really bare bones DIY program to help people set up, and then off they go. And then they can just book a short Zoom call with me. I offer that just for people like that. But you can use that and then use the free software that goes with it from either Abbott, and Abbott uses LibreView, LibreView.com. And that's a desktop app, and you can share your data with yourself. And I have a YouTube video on this about using LibreView in clinical practice, and it's for providers, but an informed consumer can do the same thing. And Dexcom has a similar desktop app that syncs with theirs, and it's called Clarity, Dexcom Clarity. And you can look at your patterns, and then when you want to talk to a dietitian, nutrition professional, you can choose to share your data with them if you like. And then, they can help you create a meal plan and some strategies. So absolutely. That's what I think. I think it's what I'm trying to get across is what Flora and Gabriel has just asked is there's a whole range of ways you can use this depending on your own knowledge and your needs. You can do it just really bare bones DIY and just ask someone for a little bit of help because you know how to read the data. You can work with a provider like me or another dietitian who can help you. You can get a subscription through a tech company and use their AI and use a dietitian. So there's a lot of different ways. Let's see, Amy's on. ADT says, how long do most people use a CGM for if they don't have diabetes? This is great. So I'd say they usually use it for a month. That most people would use it for a month. Some people longer. And I'll tell you what the difference is. I recommend a month for most people because the first 2 weeks, I always recommend people in my programs to use the first 2 weeks where you are just collecting data. You're living your life exactly the same way you were before, eating the same foods, maybe testing some things. So if you're someone who, if you're being honest with yourself, you go through the fast food lane every now and then. Do it while you're using a CGM, see what happens. And then, it's going to be a hot mess probably. And so, okay, go through the drive-through again, get something different or modify your order, maybe hold the fries, get water instead of a Coke, see what that does. So experiment with things for a couple of weeks and then put your next sensor on because Dexcom lasts 10 days, the Libre lasts 14 days. Then you have 2 weeks to start dialing it in because with people in my group, what we do is we spend those first 2 weeks experimenting, but also leveling up our nutrition knowledge. So there's some book smart going on about how blood sugar and metabolism works and some of the hacks for how to balance blood sugar and how they work. And then the second 2 weeks, you start trying those strategies. Like, does this work better? Is this the best strategy? And then by the end of the month, usually, at least in my groups, people have a good understanding of what works and what doesn't. And then I usually recommend people at least take a break for a few weeks so they can, instead of just we hyperfixate on it for a while, which can be healthy and useful for a short period of time. But then we just back up and go, okay, what are the strategies I need to employ? Stop eating 2 to 3 hours before bed, take a walk after meals, stop eating fries with my burger, whatever it is. They have their strategy and they just carry on with it. So it's usually a month. Some people go longer because they need the accountability. And some people stop and then start again periodically, maybe about once every 3 to 6 months. They put it back on for a few weeks just to see how things are going. get a little accountability, tighten things up again, and then go off. So that's usually what I see people do without when they don't have diabetes. It's a good question. Do you have any advice for a non-diabetic patient, but who's not diabetic, but has a family history of diabetes, who wants to ask their doctor for a prescription? I think we talked about this, but I would go to your doctor and say exactly that. Listen, I know I don't have diabetes, but it's everywhere in my family. So I just feel like I want to take a more active role. I want to take a peek under the hood, see what's happening. And I want it to help guide me on how to eat. So I'm moving away from diabetes instead of towards it. Will you please write me a prescription? And if they don't, reassure them, the cost, maybe they want you to have some supervision, but honestly, if they don't prescribe it, find someone who will. Because I think that's a very reasonable thing. I've had a lot of people in my programs do that because of that. And initially I was like, oh, and they would come in and they were great. Their blood sugar looked fantastic. And it was such a relief for them to know that they were doing fine and how they were eating worked well for their body. So it can be a serious relief to do that. And some people see, oh, wow, I'm really reactive, and they learn how to dial it in, and they just change their trajectory, which is great. But yes, say exactly that to your doctor. Good question. Brent, so far, a couple of stressful situations have spiked our glucose more than any of our meals. Curious if this is common. Yeah, Brent, another great question. I often get people in my programs who their diet looks great. Like they don't have insulin resistance, or they do, but it's not their diet, which is super helpful. Different people are affected by stress differently, but stress is absolutely going to affect blood sugar. For some people in the short term, like I've seen people who just jotted down and, in their notes wrote stressful phone call because they wanted it logged, because their blood sugar was fine and they got on the phone and creeped up. And that's because, those fight or flight hormones like adrenaline, they signal the liver to produce and put more glucose and free fatty acids into the bloodstream, so you can, run, fight, and think your way out of the dangerous situation. So it depends on your stress response and what's going on with you. But for sure, yep, I've seen that a lot. And in fact, when I do my 4-week group program, I should put the link in there for that. When I do my 4-week group program, I'll do that later. My goal for that program isn't to fix everybody's blood sugar. It's to teach everybody how to use this so they can do it on their own later, and to give everybody some clarity about where they need to put their focus. Because some people are still just working like mad to eliminate foods, get lower blood sugar, and do lower carb. And I see that, I'm like, you know what? They're not reactive to food. It's fine. They can put more carbs in, feel better. That's not a problem for them. For them, it is 100% stress. And someone in the group last month, we suspected this for her, and we always go through some relaxation practices. That's one of the units that we do together, how to improve sleep and stress. She did one of these 10-minute relaxation practices and watched, and her blood sugar, did it drop 30 points in 10 or 15 minutes? It was remarkable. And so she realized that all the extra work she was putting into her diet was actually creating more stress for her. And she needed to just chill on the diet and call that good enough. She'd done her due diligence and shift her effort into, okay, how do I manage my stress? That's where she needed to put her attention and her energy. Let's see if some of these have already been answered. I just want to continuously see, so this is Conrad Hunter. I want to continuously see my glucose levels and have them plotted to a graph I can later reference. No interpretation needed. Is that possible with the DIY program? Yes, my DIY program, you can do that. And you can do that with using the Clarity app for the Dexcom or the Libre View with the Freestyle Libre. And you can do that. Yep, you can do that with my DIY programs. And anytime I'm working with someone in any capacity, I make sure that they know how to use the Libre View if they want to use it, so they can see that. Will this work for gestational diabetes? Yes. And recently I saw a study that showed that using a CGM for gestational diabetes was preferable to and more superior to using an oral glucose tolerance test for pregnant women. This is not a surprise to me. This didn't require a study, but it is nice to have the study to back it up. Yes, so your metabolism does change when you're pregnant, and people will get gestational diabetes. That increases their chance of getting diabetes later, and it affects your baby. So yeah, using a CGM for a little while just to get a peek under the hood and see how things are going in there, really helpful to help guide you in your eating while you're pregnant. Also, when especially if you have other kids at home and you're pregnant, who has time to spend half a day at a lab doing oral glucose tolerance test that makes you feel like crap? Like, nobody needs that. So absolutely, gestational diabetes. It is not FDA approved for that. There's no reason. You're just putting one of these things in and reading it. It's safe. It's fine. I have been told I have hypoglycemia. Will this help? This is something a lot of people don't think about, but maybe they do. But hypoglycemia can be a really serious life-threatening problem. It can also be a real pain and an indication that you have dysglycemia, and that can increase your chances for diabetes. So I want to give a couple of examples of hypoglycemia in case this is something that you're experiencing. So one, there's a few people I've worked with who've come and said, I've been told I have hypoglycemia, I want to use a CGM. And I'll talk to them a little while, and I'm already thinking, I don't think this is hypoglycemia, but we use a CGM because their doctor has said, you have hypoglycemia. They don't. What they have is POTS. They're having blood pressure issues because of POTS, because of long COVID, or they have MCAS, EDS. And so we're able to adjust the treatment plan for that. Other people are getting hypoglycemia during their workout. They're getting woozy doing their deadlifts or their squats, or they're on the treadmill and they just get dizzy, and it's hypoglycemia. And so a CGM can help them figure out how to pre-fuel appropriately. I know both my assistant and I have had this issue and realized that what we were eating was causing us to go hypo during a workout or even a walk. So the strategies are different. There are unique strategies to eating before a workout. A lot of personal trainers know what they are. They are really savvy about this too, but a CGM helps with that. But here's another case. I have found that people who have had a procedure done on their stomach that alters their stomach, so typically this is a gastric bypass, but also people having a fundoplication done, where it's a procedure done on their stomach for reflux. Or some people have a procedure done for their Barrett's esophagus, where they remove some of the esophagus and it alters the part of their stomach. They'll end up with reactive hypoglycemia, where they have really sensitive blood sugar, and they end up with critical hypoglycemia, losing consciousness, and it's dangerous. We have found, and I've talked to some of my other colleagues, that this is a thing, and your blood sugar is just more reactive, and you need to be more vigilant about keeping steady blood sugar. And a CGM is just critical for this. Really important to learn what foods are problematic, what isn't, and to create some strategies around that. Patty, I'm so glad you brought this up. So Patty says she's noticed people get skin irritations wearing the sensor. I was fine the first time I wore it, but the second sensor irritated my skin and felt itchy. Do you have suggestions? Yes. There's a whole Facebook to the rescue. There's a whole Facebook group dedicated to, I think it's CGM skin issues, but also medical. So you can Google medical adhesive sensitivities. One of the strategies that people use is they'll spray Flonase. They'll prep the site, soap and water, let it dry, alcohol. They'll spray Flonase on the skin, let it dry, and then put the sensor on. And that, when I have talked to people, that has been a really favorite strategy, but there's other ones that people have tried as well. I'm a breast cancer survivor and my doctors have me on a plant-based diet, but my blood sugar is now in the pre-diabetic range. This gets us into the topic of medications that elevate glucose. There are a lot of medications that cause hyperglycemia or high glucose, which can take somebody who had one issue. So you took a medication, and the medication, of course, is a side effect that gives you another thing. And so the first thing we do is we look up these medications and see, is it that medication? And if it is, we go back to the provider. Is there a different medication? Is this medication necessary? Is there something else we could do? Is there a different medication that would be appropriate? But if not, like in the case of people, there's some medications that people will be on long-term after they've had breast cancer that raise blood sugar. And so, yes, using a CGM is actually really, really important because they need to learn some strategies to keep their blood sugar down. Because, doctors are recommending a plant-based diet, which isn't bad, but sometimes it can be harder for some people to manage their blood sugar on that diet. Not all people. So they just need to learn some new strategies around that, because increased insulin and blood sugar causes inflammation. And inflammation is a factor in maintaining the remission of your cancer. So having high blood sugar goes against all that other anti-inflammatory diet. So you need to find a sweet spot with that. So the CGM is really helpful for this. Carrie, who's an RD, asks, she has a postprandial spike within the glucose range that comes back to normal within 2 hours. I know is ideal. So this is kind of an advanced question. So when you eat, you have a little bit of a blood sugar, raise in blood sugar because it has carbohydrates in it, and it goes down within 2 hours. That's ideal. But a lot of us who do blood sugar educations, we're balancing out and having a regular meal with some fiber, with vegetables, some protein, healthy fat. And that, instead of coming up and coming down, it comes up slower and it takes longer to come down. And is that still okay? Or would that be more of a post-meal insulin resistance? It wouldn't be a post-meal insulin resistance necessarily. I have to look at the data, but I mean, you can probably tell the difference because the fiber, fat, and protein slows the absorption. Then it's going to stay up longer because it's still going into the bloodstream at a steady state. This isn't bad, but it depends how high it goes. Because you've probably seen this, Carrie, where your patients will go to a Mexican restaurant, an American Mexican restaurant, and have the traditional sort of burrito, enchilada, rice and beans, where it's very high in carbohydrate and very high in fat. And so blood sugar goes up and then stays up. You get the plateau, like where there's 3 or 4 hours of high blood sugar before it comes down. That you want to avoid. So it's about finding that balance. If it's still staying under 140, and it's up for maybe 3 hours, fine. And it also helps you stay full longer, So I think there's not a yes, no answer to that. It depends on the person's metabolism, depends on their goals, that kind of thing. Let's see. I think this is the last question I have that was sent in. I have a history of eating disorders and have had success with intuitive eating. I'm pre-diabetic now and would like to use a CGM, but wonder if that would affect my eating disorder. This is great. So continuous glucose monitors, I kind of across the board recommend them. I think they're great. The caution would be someone with eating disorders, but the term eating disorder or disordered eating, that's just, there's a whole bunch of different kinds, different ways this manifests in somebody. And of course, intuitive eating is a strategy that's really helpful for people with eating disorders, but sometimes it gets permissive to the point where now people develop diabetes. And that can be part of the process. So using a CGM can help inform intuitive eating. And I'd always recommend it for a short period of time. So there wasn't the chance to really obsess over the numbers too much, because you do need to be careful. And I would say always, if you do have a history of disordered eating, then it's good to have some supervision. So you have people to have a dialogue about it, whether it's your therapist, your nutrition professional, or both. But I think this is actually a really great way to do it, because now all of a sudden, if you have a diabetes diagnosis, you're going to be second guessing this intuitive eating. Well, should I eat it? Should I not eat this? What should I eat? The diet, I talk to people who look at the diabetes recommendations, and it flies in the face of what they've learned so far and can be very confusing. So I think using a continuous glucose monitor with supervision for a short period of time actually gives helpful information. It doesn't, like in my programs, we don't make food bad. Like, whoa, that spiked your blood sugar. Like sushi. I always post that having a California roll or a spicy tuna roll on an empty stomach, my blood sugar went skyrocketed. Does that mean that I can't have a spicy tuna roll? No. You need to be strategic and go, wow, that's really high in carbohydrates, spikes my blood sugar by itself. So how can I have that food and keep a healthy blood sugar? So we use these strategies like, why don't I have some protein first, like some sashimi or edamame, some miso soup. Those kinds of things will slow gastric emptying. And then instead of having like 3 California rolls, maybe I have 1 California roll, and before it I have the sashimi and edamame and miso, and it's more of a balanced meal that is also easier on my blood sugar. Or the chocolate cake. Is chocolate cake off the menu forever? No. Maybe there's a period of time where you're trying to improve your insulin sensitivity, where you just go, this month I'm just going to not have cake for a while because I need to get this dialed in. But otherwise, cake on an empty stomach, disaster. Cake after a meal with a decent amount of protein and fiber, and then having a little bit of cake, probably fine. Not at 10 o'clock at night, but definitely earlier, like before 5 o'clock would be. So there's all these strategies. So it's a way of informing intuitive eating and finding ways of being flexible with your eating based on information, not guessing, which can just kind of be a minefield, right? Right. I'm out of questions. So a couple of things that I want to give you guys is, one, I'm going to show this. Oh gosh, this made this little banner. Let's stop that. So if you want to learn more about using a continuous glucose monitor, I'm putting this across here. I've got it's like a free ebook. It's about 10 pages long ebook packet, PDF that you can download for free. And it gives you a lot of this information about prescribing and insurance and prices and how to, all this stuff. So I encourage you to download that. It's going to give you a lot of good information. Right now, if you're watching this recently, my next program is going to be in May. And this is my next group program. So I support people one-on-one, and I support people in group programs. Some people aren't group programs. But if you want to get in on the May session, you can register for that. We start May 2nd, 2023. And this is the link to find out about it. And I don't think I'm going to do any group programs over the summertime. I'll have some DIY programs that you can jump into, but I'm not going to do group programs because it's summertime and I have other things planned. So that's that. If you're not ready for that and you want to stay informed about what's coming up in the future, you can get on this wait list for Hack Your Blood Sugar using a CGM. And this wait list is, it's a place where I always open up registration first and give a discount for early registration. And this is the place it happens. But you'll also get a couple of handy emails that will get you started. You'll automatically get the letter for your provider for the prescription, and you'll get some tips that you can get started with your improving your blood sugar while you're waiting for the next program to come up. So I encourage you, if you're at all interested, to download this or to get on the wait list, because it gives you a lot of information. The wait list for Hack Your Blood Sugar. There is also, I kind of want to tell you about another program in addition to what I do. I said there's a lot of tech companies doing this work, like Levels, Nutritionist, Signos. There is a new kid on the block, and it's called Veri, VERI. And they are offering this. What I'm giving you here is I've got a discount code for them. So I've been talking to them a lot, and I think I might start partnering with them some more. They do more a la carte things where you can get a couple of sensors from them and get access to their app and their program for, say, 3 months, 2 or 3 months. And they have a really nice app. It syncs up with other wearables like Oura Rings and Fitbits and Apple Watches and stuff. And you can use that. And I think the price is really reasonable. But what's more is you can actually use their app a la carte and bring your own sensor. So you can get a prescription and use their app. And I might use that over the summertime. So you could check them out, and please you'll get a discount using this code that I have. It's an affiliate code. I really like that company, and I've been enjoying interacting with them and working more. But I'm going to go back, and before I log off, I want to go back to that freebie, because this is where you'll get all the information. If you download this free handout, learn more about CGM. I also train providers. I'm going to have another provider training coming up. I train dietitians. Are there other comments I didn't see coming up? Oh, you're welcome, you guys. I train other providers on how to do this, and I do mentoring calls, because some people, all they need is, I offer some templates and ebooks on how to get started in your practice. And then I'll often do like a mentoring call or two with a provider to help them with their own data and look at their clients' data before they get on a call with them. So I can kind of let them know how I see it. And most dietitians know what they're talking about. They just need to get familiar with this new tech, and then you're off. So if that's something you're interested in, or if you're a doctor or a prescriber, that might be a call to learn how to start offering this to your patients. It can be really handy. So yeah, thanks for joining me. And if you're on the replay, and if you need any of these links, I'll post these links in the comments on YouTube or wherever this lives. I'll put the links there so you have access to these things below. But yeah, thanks for showing up, and thanks for all your really great questions, you guys. Have a good weekend.